Between 1714 and 1830, thousands of servants maintained the glittering facade of Britain's royal palaces, experiencing both the glamour and grime of court life. They ran a society built on rigid hierarchy, incredible luxury, and bizarre customs. The palace was ruthlessly efficient, glamorous, and sometimes absurd. Here's what life was really like for a servant in a Georgian royal palace. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. Alright, tonight it's Kensington Palace during the Georgian era, but hold up, get comfortable first. I'm serious. Pillows, blankets, whatever you need. You're gonna be here a while. The bells wake you first, not the gentle kind. The harsh, insistent jangling of servant bells echoing through the narrow corridors below stairs. Your eyes snap open to darkness, your body already tensing before your mind has caught up. 5 o'clock, always 5 o'clock. Your pallet is hard beneath you, just a thin mattress stuffed with straw that does nothing to cushion against the wooden slats below. Not like your plush bed now. The tiny servant's attic room is freezing in the January dawn, your breath visible in the dim light filtering through the single small window. You can hear the other servants stirring around you, 5 of you crammed into this small space with barely enough room to dress. No privacy, no comfort, just the knowledge that you need to be downstairs and working before anyone even thinks of ringing that bell again. First day, whispers Anne, the senior housemaid who's been at Kensington for 3 years. Practically an eternity in service. Remember what I told you. Keep your eyes down, your mouth shut, and your ears open. You nod, fingers fumbling with the ties of your plain linen shift. This isn't some modest country house with a handful of staff. This is Kensington Palace in 1720, the beating heart of the court of King George I, with hundreds of servants rushing about in a carefully orchestrated dance of duty and deference. And you're now part of it. And for God's sake, Anne adds, don't stare at the Turks. The what? You ask, still half asleep. She rolls her eyes. The king's Turkish servants, Mehmet and Mustafa, they're higher ranked than everyone except maybe the steward. The English courtiers hate them, but they're the king's favourites. She lowers her voice. They say Mehmet examines the king's piles. You're about to ask what exactly that entails when the bell rings again, more insistent this time. That's Mistress Keene, Anne hisses, referring to the housekeeper. She'll have both our hides if we're late. 5 minutes later, you're hurrying down the servants' staircase, narrow, steep and winding, deliberately designed to keep you out of sight. Unlike the king's grand staircase, with its elaborate paintings and gilded banisters, this one is plain stone worn smooth by generations of hurrying feet. You've already banged your elbow twice on the sharp corners. The air changes as you descend, warmer, filled with the smell of baking bread and wood smoke from the kitchen fires that have been burning since 4. A footman rushes past, barely missing you, a silver tray balanced expertly in one hand. Watch it, he snaps, not even looking back. At the bottom of the stairs stands Mistress Keene, the housekeeper of Kensington Palace. She's a formidable woman in her 50s, with keen eyes that miss nothing and a bunch of keys hanging from her waist, the symbol of her authority. Next to her stands Mr. Hamilton, the butler, tall and imposing in his formal livery despite the early hour. "Late," Mistress Keene says simply as you arrive, slightly breathless. "Not an auspicious beginning." "Sorry, ma'am," you mumble, eyes down as instructed. "Look at me when I speak to you, girl," she says sharply. Your eyes snap up to meet hers. better. Now, you've been hired as a housemaid, but with the Cherokee delegation arriving next month, we may need all hands for different duties. You'll go where you're told. When you're told, without question. Is that clear? Yes, ma'am. Good. Anne will show you your duties. The palace is waking. Do not be seen by the family or the courtiers, and do not, under any circumstances, make noise. They are not to be reminded that their comforts require work. With that dismissal, you follow Anne into a world that exists parallel to the opulent splendour above, the hidden realm of the servants. First thing, Anne whispers as you hurry along a corridor, we have to light the fires in the main rooms before anyone's up. 28 fireplaces, and they all need to be cleaned out, laid fresh and lit before the family rises. 28? You repeat, dismayed. And that's just our section, Anne says with a grim smile. The palace has over 100 rooms. Good thing you're not afraid of a bit of soot. Oh, and stairs. Lots of stairs. You're carrying a heavy bucket of coal, trying to keep up with Anne's brisk pace, when you turn a corner and nearly collide with two men in elaborate, colourful clothing unlike any you've seen before. One wears what looks like a Polish fur hat above an Eastern-style undergarment and jacket. The other is similarly dressed in a fusion of European and Ottoman styles. Anne immediately presses herself against the wall, eyes downcast, and you hastily follow suit. Those are them, she breathes once they've passed. The Turks, that's Mehmet von Königstreu and Mustafa von Misitri, former prisoners of war from Ottoman Greece. Now they're the king's most trusted servants. Mehmet's the keeper of the privy purse, controls all the king's personal spending. They don't look like servants, you whisper back, remembering their rich clothes. That's the thing about court. Nothing's what you'd expect, Anne replies. Now come on, we've got fires to light. The next hour is a blur of fireplaces, sweeping out old ashes, laying fresh kindling, lighting fires and trying not to get completely covered in soot in the process, all while moving as silently as possible through the grand state rooms of Kensington Palace. Each room is more opulent than the last. Rich tapestries, gleaming furniture, priceless paintings, but you barely have time to look as you work. Don't gawk, Anne hisses when she catches you staring at an enormous painting. That's how you get noticed, and trust me, you don't want to be noticed. By the time you've finished with the fires, your back aches and your hands are filthy despite the cloths you've wrapped around them. But there's no rest. Now it's time to fetch water for the morning washing and bathing of the royal family and their guests. Water has to be hauled up from the kitchens, Anne explains, as you both pick up large copper jugs. No running water up here, so every drop has to be carried by us. The king likes his water scalding hot, and if it's cooled too much by the time it reaches his chambers... She draws a finger across her throat. The water is indeed scalding, steam rising from it as you carefully make your way up the servants' stairs, trying not to slop any onto yourself. Your arms tremble with the effort. Each jug weighs nearly 20 pounds, and this is just the first of many trips you'll make today. As you're struggling up the stairs, a bell rings sharply from somewhere above. That's the bell from the Queen's drawing room, Anne says, not breaking stride. Someone else will get that. Each bell has a different tone, and they're all connected to a board in the servants' hall. Shows which room is ringing. You'll learn them all eventually. How many are there? You ask, arms burning from the weight of the water. 56, Anne replies matter-of-factly. And you better come running when you hear yours. You reach the top of the stairs, and Anne leads you down a corridor toward the private chambers. Quick now, she urges. We need to have this water in place before... She stops abruptly as a door ahead opens. Anne immediately flattens herself against the wall again, and you copy her. Water sloshing dangerously in your jug. A group of elegantly dressed people emerge from the room, courtiers by their fine clothes. Among them is a woman so extraordinarily attired that you can't help but stare. Her dress, a mantua, stands out from her body on both sides, making her nearly 6 feet wide. The fabric is patterned silk with an elaborate embroidery of seashells. Her hair is powdered white and piled high, adding another foot to her height. She moves with small, careful steps, unable to cross her arms or sit down in the restrictive garment. 2 maids follow behind her, ready to assist with the elaborate dress at a moment's notice. "That's Lady Howard," Anne whispers once they've passed. "She's a maid of honour to the Princess of Wales. They have to wear those court dresses whenever they're on duty. Can't sit down, can barely walk and need help using the chamber pot." She smirks slightly. "Still think the life upstairs is all glamour?" You continue on your way, passing a window that looks out over the elaborate Kensington gardens. You catch a glimpse of more finely dressed people strolling along the paths, footmen trailing discreetly behind them. "Never look out the windows when you're working," Anne admonishes. Servants don't have time for views. After delivering the water, there's still no rest. The family will be waking soon, and there are chamber pots to empty, beds to make, clothes to lay out, floors to sweep, and 1,000 other tasks that must be completed before the occupants of Kensington Palace properly begin their day. "When do we eat?" you ask Anne, as your stomach growls audibly. "We get breakfast after the family has theirs," she replies. "Around 10, if we're lucky. Hope you're not the fainting type." By the time you finally make it to the servants' hall for breakfast, you've been working for 5 solid hours without a break. Your back aches, your arms burn, and you've climbed more stairs than you can count. But you're also buzzing with the excitement of being inside the very heart of court life. The servants' hall is crowded and noisy, a stark contrast to the hushed corridors above. Here, below stairs, servants can talk and even laugh, though always with one ear cocked for the sound of bells. You take a seat at the long wooden table, careful to observe the strict hierarchy. Upper servants, the steward, housekeeper, butler, and cook, sit at the head of the table. Next come the valets and ladies' maids who serve the family directly. Then the footmen and housemaids like yourself. At the very bottom are the kitchen maids, scullery maids, and potboys, the lowest of the low. Breakfast is simple but filling. Porridge, bread, and ale. No coffee or tea. Those expensive luxuries are reserved for upstairs. As you eat, you listen to the conversations swirling around you, each one revealing another facet of palace life. "The king's in a foul mood," a valet is saying. "His piles are bothering him again. Mehmet had to examine them this morning. Better him than me," another servant replies with a grimace, prompting muffled laughter. "Watch yourself with Lady Carlton," a lady's maid warns a footman. "She reported Jenkins for looking her in the eye, and he was dismissed without a character." "Did you hear about Peter?" a housemaid whispers excitedly to her neighbour. "The wild boy? They say the king's bringing him to court as a curiosity. Found him living in the woods near Hanover, raised by wolves or some such." "What about the Cherokee chief coming next month?" another asks. "They say he paints his face black and red and brings eagle feathers as gifts." The conversation dies as Mr. Hamilton, the butler, rises from his seat. "The king will be receiving visitors in the presence chamber at 11. Jenkins, Thomas, you'll attend. Mary, Elizabeth, you'll serve refreshments. The rest of you, to your duties. And remember, eyes down, move silently, be invisible unless required." As everyone rises to return to work, Anne nudges you. "Come on, we've got the Queen's drawing room to clean, and Mistress Keene will be inspecting it herself." "Will we see the Queen?" you ask, then immediately regret it as several nearby servants snicker. There is no queen, Anne explains patiently as you follow her back upstairs. The king divorced his wife years ago, caught her with a Swedish count. He keeps his half-sister Sophia Charlotte and his mistress Melusine here instead, but don't ever mention the divorce unless you want to be dismissed on the spot. The Queen's drawing room, despite its name, is now used primarily for the King's sister and her ladies. It's the largest, grandest room you've seen yet, with soaring ceilings, enormous windows overlooking the gardens, and walls covered in priceless tapestries and paintings. "We have to dust every inch," Anne says, handing you a feather duster, including all the picture frames, furniture legs and carvings, but don't touch the paintings themselves. The king had a maid whipped for leaving a smudge on one last year. As you work, you can't help stealing glances at the paintings. One in particular catches your eye, an enormous mural showing dozens of people in various exotic costumes. Looking closer, you realise it depicts the king's court here at Kensington. "That's the King's Staircase," Anne says, following your gaze. Painted by William Kent a few years back, shows all the real people at court, even some of the servants. "See there?" she points. "That's Peter the Wild Boy, and there's John Cato, the Black Trumpeter. And look, Kent even painted himself and his mistress up in the corner. There are so many different types of people," you observe, surprised by the diversity depicted. "That's court for you," Anne replies. "The king brings people from all over, not always popular with the English courtiers, mind you. They think England should be for the English." She snorts, as if any of these royals are actually English themselves. The king barely speaks the language. A bell rings suddenly, its tone distinctive even to your untrained ear. "That's the presence chamber," Anne says, immediately setting aside her duster. "The king must be receiving visitors earlier than planned. Come on, we need to make sure the fire's built up. It's freezing in there, and George hates the cold." You hurry through the palace corridors, taking care to use the servants' passages whenever possible to avoid being seen. Through one doorway you catch a glimpse of the grand entrance to the king's state apartments, the king's staircase itself, just like in the painting. Courtiers in elaborate dress are ascending the stairs, practiced expressions of confidence on their faces, even as they clench and unclench their hands nervously. "That's how visitors enter," Anne explains as you duck down a different corridor, up the king's staircase to be intimidated by all those paintings staring down at them, then through a series of increasingly grand rooms until they finally reach the king, makes them properly humble by the time they get there. When you reach the presence chamber, you slip in through a small side door almost invisible in the panelling. The room is indeed cold despite the fire, and you immediately set to work adding more logs while Anne straightens the throne canopy. The throne itself stands empty and imposing on a dais, its rich red upholstery gleaming in the firelight. You're just finishing with the fire when the main doors open. Immediately, you and Anne press yourselves against the wall, eyes down, trying to become invisible as courtiers begin to file in. "Remember," Anne breathes, barely audible. "Not a sound, not a movement until they're gone." And so you stand, frozen against the wall, as the elite of Georgian court society fill the room. Their voices wash over you, discussing politics, fashion, who's in favour, who's out. The air fills with the scent of perfume, powder, and unwashed bodies beneath the finery. Even the aristocracy bathes rarely, believing it unhealthy. Then a hush falls, and from your downcast position you see the courtiers bow and curtsy deeply as someone enters the room, the king. George the Fom is shorter than you expected, a stocky man of 60 with a florid face and a prominent nose. His wig is perfectly powdered, his coat richly embroidered with gold thread. He walks with a slight limp, gout according to palace gossip, and is followed closely by Mehmet and Mustafa, the Turkish valets. The king takes his seat on the throne, face impassive as the courtiers rise from their bows. He says something in German to Mehmet, who translates it into English for the assembled crowd. His Majesty will receive petitions now, Mehmet announces, his accented English carrying across the room. One by one, the courtiers approach the throne, bowing again before presenting their requests to the king. Some seek positions for themselves or family members, others royal patronage for projects, still others resolution to disputes. George listens impassively to each, occasionally conferring with Mehmet before giving his answer in German, which Mehmet then translates. From your position against the wall, you observe the intricate dance of court politics playing out before you. Every gesture, every word seems calculated. When the king smiles slightly at one petitioner, the courtiers shift almost imperceptibly, recalibrating the man's status in their minds. When he frowns at another, you can almost feel the man's stock plummeting. Or see how it works? Anne whispers, so quietly you barely hear her. One smile from the king makes a career, one frown breaks it, and we see it all. As the audience continues, you remain motionless against the wall, your legs beginning to cramp from standing so still. But you dare not move. Servants who draw attention to themselves rarely last long at court. Finally, after what seems like hours, the king rises. Instantly, everyone bows again as George leaves the room, followed by his entourage. Only when the last courtier has departed does Anne finally step away from the wall, rolling her shoulders to ease the stiffness. "Not bad," she says, looking you over. "You didn't faint, Fidget, or make a sound. Might make a proper palace servant of you yet." As you help Anne clear the room, gathering discarded gloves, handkerchiefs, and even a forgotten snuff box, she continues your education in palace life. "The real power isn't always where you think," she says, checking under a chair for any missed items. "Take the king's mistress, Melusine. She has the king's ear more than any minister, and the housekeepers and valets, they know every secret, hear every whisper. Information is valuable currency at court." She straightens up, a slight smile on her face. That's why it's not so bad being invisible. People forget we're there. They say things, do things they wouldn't if they remembered the servants have eyes and ears. You think about everything you've seen and heard already in just your first few hours at Kensington Palace. The political manoeuvring, the secrets, the rigid hierarchy that governs every interaction. It's a far cry from the simple farm life you left behind, but there's an undeniable excitement to being at the very centre of power, even if you're just dusting the furniture where that power sits. "Come on," Anne says, heading for the door. "We've got the Cherokee delegation arriving soon, and Mistress Keene wants all the guest chambers prepared. No rest for palace servants, not when there's royal business afoot." As you follow her back into the labyrinth of Kensington Palace, you realise you've barely scratched the surface of life in this complex, fascinating, exhausting world. The bells may rule your days, the work may break your back, but you're now part of the great machinery that keeps the Georgian court running. Invisible, perhaps, but indispensable. And tomorrow you'll do it all again. The day stretches ahead like an endless corridor of tasks. Your back already aches from hauling water and coal, but you've barely begun your first day at Kensington Palace. "Finished daydreaming?" Anne asks, catching you staring out a window at the gardens. "Come on, Mistress Keene wants us in the laundry rooms next." You follow her down another narrow staircase, descending deeper into the palace's underbelly. The temperature rises noticeably as you reach the bottom, a stark contrast to the cold corridors above. "Prepare yourself," Anne warns as she pushes open a heavy wooden door. "It's like the mouth of hell in here." She wasn't exaggerating. The laundry room hits you with a wall of steam and heat so intense you instinctively step back. 6 women work in the cramped space, their faces flushed red, hair plastered to their foreheads with sweat despite the January cold outside. Enormous copper tubs bubble with boiling water over roaring fires, filling the air with steam and the sharp scent of lye soap and starch. This is where all the royal linen gets washed, Anne explains, raising her voice over the clatter of wooden paddles and the splash of water. Sheets, napkins, tablecloths, all the family's personal linens, over 300 items a day. One of the women looks up from her work, arms elbow deep in scalding water. "You the new girl?" she calls. You nod. "Thank God. We need more hands. Royal napkins don't scrub themselves." "Not today," Anne says quickly. "Mistress Keene wants her in the Queen's drawing room for now, but she'll be down soon enough, I'm sure." "Lucky you," the woman says with a weary smile. "Enjoy the reprieve while it lasts." As you leave the sweltering laundry, Anne explains, laundry women are actually quite well paid compared to other servants. They get a salary plus an allowance for the things they need, alum, starch, clothes chests, but it's brutal work. Most who start there don't last a month. "Where are we going next?" you ask, grateful for the relative cool of the corridor after the laundry room's inferno. "Kitchens. Mistress Keene wants to introduce you to the cook. You might get pulled in to help there if they're short-handed." The palace kitchens make the laundry seem calm by comparison. Enormous fireplaces line one wall, each with various pots, cauldrons and spits attended by sweating men and boys. Counters overflow with ingredients, vegetables being chopped, meat being trimmed, pastry being rolled. The noise is overwhelming. Shouting, chopping, the sizzle and crack of fires, the clatter of pots and pans. Standing in the centre of this controlled chaos is a tall, imposing man barking orders like a general on a battlefield. This, Anne whispers, is William Daniel, Master Cook to King George II and Queen Caroline. "No, no, no," Daniel bellows at a terrified-looking boy of about 12. "The force meat goes inside the bird, not alongside it. Do I need to show you again, or shall I just send you back to whatever pigsty spawned you?" The boy mumbles an apology and quickly corrects his mistake. Daniel spots you and Anne hovering near the doorway and stalks over, wiping his hands on his apron. "This the new one?" he asks Anne, looking you up and down with a critical eye. "Yes, Mr. Daniel. Mistress Keene thought she should meet the kitchen staff." Daniel sniffs. Scrawny little thing, isn't she? Still, might be useful for fetching and carrying. He turns back to his domain. "I'm preparing tonight's menu. Cherokee delegation arriving soon means we'll be serving some English specialties to impress the savages." You bite your tongue at his casual prejudice as he continues, flipping open a leather-bound notebook and scanning the pages. Let's see, potted turtle, puffins, tongue and udders boiled, all on china hot plates for the royal table, and macaron with cheese for the German palates. He glances at you. "You know anything about cooking, girl?" "Some, sir," you answer. "Basic country cooking, nothing like this." He snorts. "Course not. Still, you've got all your fingers, which is more than some of the fools they send me. If they need extra hands in here, at least try not to cut yourself. Blood ruins a good sauce." A sweaty, harried-looking woman approaches Daniel, wiping her hands on her apron. "The puffins have arrived, sir, but they're not as fresh as they should be." Daniel swears colourfully. "When are they ever? Fine, we'll have to mask it with spices. Where's that damned nutmeg I asked for?" As Daniel storms off to deal with the puffin crisis, Anne tugs your sleeve. "Come on, we should go. He'll forget all about us in 5 minutes, but if we're still here when he remembers, he'll put us to work." Back in the corridor, you ask, Puffins, people eat those. Anne nods. The rich eat everything just because they can. Turtle, puffin, peacock. If it's rare or hard to get, they want it on their plate. And what's bristling Hanover? I heard him mention it. Some German dish the king likes. Daniel hates making it, but the king insists. George may be king of England, but his heart's still in Hanover. As you continue your tour of the palace's lower regions, you pass a room where a small, wiry man is sharpening what looks like an enormous saw. Ice housekeeper, Anne explains at your questioning look. His job is to collect ice from the ponds and canals around the palace and store it in the ice house for summer use. That saw's for cutting blocks from frozen ponds. The man looks up and gives you a friendly nod. New girl, eh? Welcome to the madhouse. He holds up the saw, getting ready for tomorrow. Ponds finally frozen solid enough to cut. What's the ice used for, you ask, curious about this strange occupation. Ice creams and cold drinks for the family, he answers, and cooling wine and champagne. Very fashionable now, having cold drinks even in summer. The king loves his champagne chilled. Your tour continues through the warren of rooms and corridors that make up the service areas of Kensington Palace. You meet the rat catcher, a grizzled old man with suspicious scratches on his hands and a cage of ferrets in his room. The mole taker, who spends his days in the gardens catching the creatures that ruin the king's carefully manicured lawns. And even the necessary women, the lowest ranked female servants whose job is sweeping floors and emptying chamber pots. Every job has its place in the household, Anne explains as you walk. It's like a giant machine and we're all just cogs in it. Remove one piece and the whole thing falls apart. Even the mole taker, you ask skeptically? Even him, the king would throw a fit if his gardens were ruined by mole hills, and a royal fit means everyone suffers. As you turn a corner, you nearly collide with a young boy of about 14, dressed in fine but slightly ill-fitting clothes. What's strange is his behaviour. He's crawling on all fours, making odd grunting noises, and quickly pulls you aside as an exasperated-looking man in scholarly robes follows the boy. "Peter, Peter, come here at once," the man calls, but the boy just continues crawling, occasionally stopping to sniff at the floor like a dog. "That's Peter, the wild boy," Anne whispers as they pass. "The one I told you about from the painting, found living in the woods in Germany. Doesn't speak, acts like an animal. The king brought him to court as a curiosity. That's Dr. Arbuthnot trying to teach him proper behaviour." "Has he had any success?" Anne shakes her head. "Not really. Can't get him to talk at all, but the court finds him amusing, so he stays." You continue on, passing through a corridor where bells of different sizes line the wall, each connected by wires to different rooms throughout the palace. "This is the heart of the system," Anne explains. "Each bell makes a different sound, so servants know which room is calling without looking at the board. Takes most people months to learn them all." Just then, one of the bells rings sharply. A footman who's been lounging nearby immediately stands at attention, checks the board, and hurries off. "Princess Caroline's dressing room," Anne says. "Poor James. Her lady-in-waiting is a dragon." The morning passes in a whirlwind of introductions and tasks. You help clean silver, dust ornaments, polish furniture, and carry messages between different departments. By midday, your feet are throbbing, and you've lost all sense of direction in the palace's labyrinthine layout. "Don't worry," Anne says as you admit your confusion. "Took me a month to stop getting lost. Just remember, green carpets mean the king's apartments, blue means the princess's, and red is for guests and staterooms." In the servants' hall at midday, you finally get a proper meal, a thick stew made from leftover meat from the royal table with plenty of bread to dip in it. The hierarchy is still strictly observed, but the atmosphere is more relaxed than breakfast, with servants gossiping and exchanging news. "Heard the Cherokees are bringing wampum belts as gifts," a footman says between mouthfuls. "Whatever those are." "Eagle feathers too," adds a maid, "and they paint their faces for ceremonies. Can you imagine the king's face when he sees that?" "Speaking of faces," another servant chimes in, lowering his voice, "did you see Lady Harrington's new beauty patches trying to hide the smallpox scars, poor thing?" "Better than Lord Fenton's solution," replies the first footman with a smirk. "Slathering himself in white lead paint like a common trollop. He'll be mad as a hatter within the year with all that poison seeping into his skin." The conversation flows around you, a river of palace gossip, complaints about particularly demanding courtiers, and speculation about who's rising or falling in the king's favour. You listen, fascinated by this parallel world that exists alongside the glittering court above. After the meal, Anne leads you to the yeoman's wardrobe, a vast room filled with clothing belonging to the royal family and key courtiers. "This is where we maintain and store their clothes," she explains. "Each item has to be carefully inspected for damage, repaired if necessary, cleaned appropriately, and stored properly. Get it wrong and it's your head." An older woman is seated by the window, carefully stitching lace onto a magnificent gown of blue silk. She looks up as you enter. "Mrs. Thrale, this is our new housemaid," Anne introduces you. "Mrs. Thrale is dresser to Queen Charlotte." The woman nods in acknowledgement. Another pair of hands always welcome. "Can you sew, girl?" "Yes, ma'am," you reply. "My mother taught me." "Good. We're always mending something around here. Those court mantuas tear easily with all that hooping and whalebone." She holds up the dress she's working on. "This is for Lady Howard. Notice the seashells? That's her family crest motif. Every detail matters in court dress. The wrong embroidery could cause a diplomatic incident." You examine the exquisite gown more closely. The craftsmanship is extraordinary, with tiny pearls sewn among the embroidered shells. The fabric alone must have cost a fortune. "How do they even move in these?" you ask, remembering Lady Howard's mincing steps from earlier. Mrs. Thrale chuckles. "They don't much. Court dress isn't for comfort, girl. It's for display, showing your wealth and status. The more uncomfortable and impractical, the better. Means you don't have to do anything useful." As you help Anne sort through a chest of linens, checking each piece for tears or stains, Mrs. Thrale continues working on the gown while sharing her observations on court life. "Been here 23 years, she says, needle flashing in the winter light. "Seen 3 kings come and go. They all have their quirks. This one hates bathing, thinks it lets in bad humours. Last one was obsessed with his timepieces, had 50 clocks all set to chime at different times, used to drive the servants mad." A bell rings in the distance and Anne looks up. "That's the king's gallery. They'll need the fires built up. He's showing the new paintings to some guests." "Go on then," Mrs. Thrale says, "and mind you don't brush against any of the artwork. That French master last month cost more than you'd earn in 50 lifetimes." You and Anne hurry through the palace, taking the servants' shortcuts to reach the king's gallery quickly. This magnificent space is lined with paintings. Portraits, landscapes, and historical scenes, all in gilded frames. Tall windows let in the winter light, illuminating the polished wood floor and richly coloured rugs. Quick, build up the fire before they arrive, Anne instructs, pointing to the massive fireplace at one end of the gallery, and dust the frames, but for God's sake don't touch the paintings themselves. You work quickly, adding logs to the fire and carefully dusting the ornate frames. The gallery is empty for now, but voices from the adjoining room indicate the king and his guests will arrive soon. When they come in, we stand by the wall and don't move, Anne reminds you. Like statues, they don't want to be reminded that keeping this place running takes actual people. Sure enough, just as you finish dusting the last frame, the doors open and a group enters. King George is at the centre, accompanied by several courtiers and a man who must be the artist, an elegant figure with a velvet coat and confident bearing. "Ah, William, come and tell them about your latest work," the king says in heavily accented English, gesturing to a large landscape that's recently been hung. William Kent, for it must be the same artist who painted the king's staircase, moves forward with a slight bow. "Your Majesty, this is a view of Richmond Palace from the river. I've taken some artistic liberties with the light to better capture the majesty of the royal residence." As the group moves slowly through the gallery, discussing each painting, you and Anne stand motionless against the wall, eyes downcast. Just as Anne taught you, you've become invisible, part of the palace itself rather than a person. The king stops by one painting, frowning slightly. "This frame. It is new?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Kent replies. "The original was damaged during transport from Hampton Court." George makes a non-committal sound and moves on, but one of the courtiers lingers, studying the frame with apparent suspicion. He runs a finger along the gilded edge, then turns sharply toward where you and Anne are standing. "You there," he calls, pointing at you. "Did you dust this frame today?" Your heart leaps into your throat. Being addressed directly by a courtier is rarely good news for a servant. Anne gives you the tiniest nod, indicating you should answer. "Yes, my lord," you reply, keeping your eyes down. "There's still dust on the lower corner," he says coldly. "Perhaps you require instruction in the proper way to clean. What is your name?" Before you can answer, a smooth voice cuts in. "My Lord Carteret, I believe the issue may be the light. See how it catches the gilding from this angle? An illusion only." It's Kent, the artist, casually stepping between you and the irate courtier. He makes a show of examining the frame closely. "Yes, just as I thought. The new gilding reflects differently. No dust at all. In fact, it's exemplary work." He gives you the briefest glance and wink before turning back to Lord Carteret. "Now I must show you the companion piece to this. It's just here." As Kent deftly leads the courtier away, you release the breath you didn't realize you were holding. Anne gives you a warning look. Stay still, say nothing. When the royal party finally leaves the gallery, Anne immediately pulls you into a small antechamber off the main room. "That was close," she hisses. "Lord Carteret has had 3 servants dismissed this month alone. He likes finding fault." "Why did Kent help me?" you ask, still shaken by the encounter. Anne shrugs. "Artists are odd. They notice us more than the others do, maybe because they spend so much time observing everything." She straightens your cap, which has gone slightly askew. "But don't count on being rescued again. Next time, make damn sure there's not a speck of dust left anywhere." The afternoon brings more tasks, laying fresh linen in the guest chambers, helping to inventory the royal silver, a task that requires 2 witnesses at all times to prevent theft, and learning how to properly fold the heavy velvet curtains in the state rooms to allow exactly the right amount of light without exposing the precious furnishings to damaging sun. By the time the servant's supper is served at 6, you're exhausted, your muscles aching from the unaccustomed work. But there's no rest yet. The court will be dining at 8, and all hands are needed to prepare. The The great dining room is a hive of activity as footmen set the enormous table with gleaming silver and crystal, each place setting measured precisely with rulers to ensure perfect alignment. Candles by the hundred are being lit in the chandeliers and wall sconces, filling the room with warm light and the faint scent of beeswax. 3 courses tonight, Anne explains as you help lay out napkins folded into elaborate shapes. First course is the heavy dishes, roasts, pies, soups. Then the remove, where some dishes are taken away and others brought in. Second course is lighter, fowl, vegetables, perhaps some fish. Then everything is cleared for dessert. How many dishes in total, you ask, watching servants carry in silver platters and tureens. For a diplomatic dinner like tonight, probably 70 different dishes per course, Anne replies casually, as if this isn't an astounding number. All laid out on the table at once, French style. The guests serve themselves from whatever's in reach, which is why the placement of dishes is so important. Daniel, the master cook, enters to inspect the table, his critical eye missing nothing. No, the potted turtle goes nearer His Majesty, and the puffins should be across from Lady Howard. She's partial to them. He makes several more adjustments, fussing over the arrangement until it meets his exacting standards. Remember, he instructs the footman, dishes must be placed on the table with absolute silence. No clattering, no scraping. The conversation should not be interrupted by the arrival of food. As the hour approaches for dinner, you and Anne are stationed in a small room adjoining the dining room, ready to fetch anything needed during the meal. Through the partially open door, you can see the magnificent table with its gleaming silver, crystal and china, the light from hundreds of candles making the room glow like a jewel box. Will we see the Cherokee chief? You whisper to Anne. She shakes her head. Not yet. He arrives tomorrow. Tonight is just for the court and diplomatic corps, getting all the protocol straight before the savages arrive. She makes a face at the word, as if half the nobles aren't savages themselves, the way they behave. The meal begins with the arrival of the courtiers, resplendent in their finest clothes. The ladies' mantuas are even more elaborate than what you saw earlier, making the women appear almost like exotic birds with their wide skirts and towering hair. The gentlemen are no less magnificent in their embroidered coats, silk stockings and powdered wigs. King George enters last, and everyone rises until he takes his seat at the head of the table. Only then does the actual eating begin, with footmen moving silently around the table, serving wine and offering dishes that are out of reach. From your position, you can observe the intricate dance of court dining, the delicate way the ladies eat despite their restrictive clothing, the careful conversation that avoids controversial topics, the subtle competition as courtiers try to catch the king's eye or ear. See how Lady Harrington keeps trying to draw the king's attention, Anne whispers. Her husband wants the ambassadorship to Venice, and look at Lord Fenton, filling the French ambassador's glass every chance he gets, hoping for support in some trade agreement, I'd wager. As the meal progresses, you notice something odd. Despite the abundance of food, many of the courtiers eat very little, merely picking at the dishes before them. They've already eaten, Anne explains when you mention this. Most of the court dines privately earlier. This formal dinner is for show, for politics. The food is almost beside the point. Then why prepare 70 dishes, you ask, bewildered by the waste? Because the number of dishes shows the king's wealth and power, and don't worry, nothing goes to waste. The upper servants get the leftovers from the royal table, then the lower servants, and anything still remaining goes to the poor at the palace gates. As if to illustrate her point, a quiet commotion breaks out when a footman accidentally drops a spoon. The small sound seems magnified in the carefully maintained atmosphere of the dining room. The king glances over sharply, and the footman goes pale. "James is done for," Anne murmurs. Breaking the silence of service is a dismissible offence. Sure enough, the butler makes a small gesture, and James is immediately replaced by another footman who steps in so smoothly that the service continues without interruption. James slips out a side door, his face a mask of despair. "He'll be told to pack his things tonight," Anne says. No reference either, most likely. He'll be lucky to find work as a tavern potboy after this. The brutal efficiency of the system strikes you anew. One small mistake and a career is over. The margin for error in royal service is non-existent. After the meal concludes and the court withdraws to the drawing rooms for music and cards, the real work begins. The dining room must be completely cleaned, every piece of silver polished and stored, the linen laundered, the leftover food properly distributed according to the strict hierarchy. You help clear plates, careful not to chip or scratch anything. The value of a single place setting exceeds your yearly wages many times over. Tomorrow will be even busier, Anne tells you as you work. The Cherokee delegation arrives at noon. Everyone needs to be ready by 10. The king wants to impress them with our English civilization. She rolls her eyes, as if they don't have their own. Later, as you finally climb the servants' stairs to your attic room, legs trembling with exhaustion, you reflect on your first day at Kensington Palace. You've seen more luxury, met more strange characters, and learned more about the hidden machinery of power than in your entire life before. In the tiny room, the other maids are already getting ready for bed. Most are too tired for conversation, stripping off their uniforms and collapsing onto their pallets. Tomorrow will begin at 5 again, another day of invisible service to the visible splendour of the Georgian court. "Well," Anne asks as you sink onto your hard mattress, "still think palace life is all glamour?" You shake your head, too exhausted to speak. The candlelight catches a patch of silver polish on your hand that you missed when washing, a small gleaming reminder of your place in the grand scheme of Kensington Palace. "Get some sleep," Anne advises, blowing out the candle. "Tomorrow we meet the Cherokees, and tomorrow you really learn what it means to be a royal servant." The bells wake you before dawn again, though your body protests with every movement. Yesterday's labour has left muscles aching that you didn't even know you had. Your back throbs from carrying water, your arms burn from scrubbing floors, and your feet feel like they've been pounded with hammers. "Up you get," Anne says, already dressing in the dim light. "Big day today, Cherokees arriving." You groan softly as you force yourself to sit up, straw rustling beneath you. "Sore?" Anne asks with a knowing smile. First week's always the worst. After that, your body either gets used to it or gives out entirely. "Does anyone ever get used to this?" you ask, wincing as you pull on your stockings. "Course, Mrs. Thrale's been doing it 23 years, hasn't she? Though she says her knees are pretty much done for." You think of the dresser's careful movements yesterday, the way she shifted in her seat occasionally, as if to ease some persistent pain. "The trick," Anne continues, fastening her apron, "is to save your strength where you can. Don't rush upstairs when no one's watching. Sit whenever possible, and for God's sake never volunteer for anything." You follow her advice as best you can as the morning routine begins. Fires to light, water to carry, chamber pots to empty. But today, there's an added urgency to everything, a tension that runs through the entire palace like a plucked string. They've been preparing for this Cherokee visit for months, Anne explains as you hurry through the corridors. King wants to impress them, show how powerful England is, so they'll stay allies against the French in the colonies. Politics. She says the word with the same tone someone might use for a bad smell. When you reach the servants' hall for breakfast, the room is buzzing with activity and gossip. Heard they're bringing scalps as gifts, a footman says, eyes wide. Don't be stupid, a lady's maid retorts. It's wampum belts and tobacco. What about the face paint? Another servant asks. Jenkins says they paint themselves like devils for war. This isn't war, is it? A nervous-looking young maid asks. Depends who you ask, Anne mutters beside you. The French might call it war. Mr. Hamilton claps his hands sharply, silencing the chatter. Enough speculation. The Cherokee delegation will arrive at noon. They are to be treated with the same respect as any foreign dignitaries. Any servant caught gawking, whispering, or behaving inappropriately will be dismissed without character. Is that understood? A chorus of "Yes, Mr. Hamilton" follows. Good. Now, each of you has your assigned duties. The king expects perfection today, and so do I. As you eat your porridge, you notice a woman you haven't seen before entering the hall. She's well dressed, not in servant's clothes, but not in court finery either. Something in between. She's plump, healthy-looking, with a calm, dignified bearing. Who's that? You whisper to Anne. Catherine Elliot, Anne replies quietly. Used to be wet nurse to Prince James. Now she has some official position at court, companion or something. Still treated with respect because she literally fed the royal blood with her own body. You study the woman with new interest. So she used to breastfeed the prince, not the queen? Anne snorts. Royal ladies don't feed their own babies. Too high and mighty for that. They find healthy women who've just had babies themselves to do it. But she's still here even though the prince must be grown now. Once you've literally nursed a royal at your breast, you've got a connection they can't ignore. They take care of their wet nurses. Good position if you can get it. Well paid, respected, set for life. After breakfast, you're assigned to help prepare the cupola room where the initial meeting with the Cherokee delegation will take place. It's one of the most magnificent rooms you've seen yet. Octagonal, with a domed ceiling painted with an elaborate celestial scene, marble columns, and gilded statues in niches. Designed by William Kent for the king, Anne explains as you polish a marble tabletop. This is where they receive the most important visitors. As you work, a woman enters carrying an armful of fresh linens. She's clearly a servant, but carries herself with unusual confidence. That's Mrs. Silker, Anne whispers. She's dresser to Queen Charlotte, been here forever. Mrs. Silker nods to you both as she lays out the linens on a side table. New girl? She asks, looking you over. Yes, ma'am, you reply. Just started yesterday. Well, you'll want to get those corners properly polished. The king notices everything. She adjusts the linens with practiced efficiency. Anne, Mistress Keene wants you to help with the Queen's drawing room. I'll finish showing the new girl around. Anne leaves, and you continue polishing under Mrs. Silker's watchful eye. Unlike some of the other senior servants, she doesn't bark orders or criticise constantly. Instead, she occasionally offers quiet guidance. Small circles work better on marble, or a bit more oil there. As you work, she tells you more about her role. Been dresser to the Queen for 12 years now. Before that, I served her mother. Know exactly how she likes her clothes arranged, which order to hand the pieces to her, which perfumes she prefers on which days. Is it difficult, being so close to the royals? You ask. Mrs. Silker considers this. Yes and no. They're people when it comes down to it. have their moods, their preferences. The trick is learning them, anticipating them. Make yourself useful but not noticeable. She straightens a tassel on a cushion. The Queen reads the newspaper while she's being dressed. Sometimes reads bits aloud to me. Not that she's asking my opinion, mind you, just thinking aloud. This glimpse into the private moments of royal life fascinates you. So she talks to you like a normal person? Not exactly like normal, Mrs. Silker says with a small smile. But yes, she talks. They all do. When you're helping someone dress, doing their hair, there's an intimacy to it. They forget sometimes the difference in our stations. She glances around the room, ensuring everything is perfect. That's one thing you learn quickly in palace service. The royals and nobles see us when it suits them and forget us when it doesn't. You'll be invisible most days, but there'll be moments when suddenly you're very visible indeed. Those moments can make or break you. A bell rings in the distance, not the sharp summons of a service bell, but the deeper tone of the palace clock. 11, Mrs. Silker says. They'll be arriving in an hour. We should finish up here and make ourselves scarce. You complete the preparations, making sure every surface gleams, every object is perfectly placed. As you're about to leave, Mrs. Silker pauses. If you get a chance, she says quietly, try to glimpse the Cherokee chief. I saw him when he arrived in London last week. Fascinating man. Not at all the savage the courtiers are expecting. Before you can ask more, she's gone, slipping silently through a servant's door. You return to the servants' hall where Mistress Keene is assigning last-minute duties. You, she says, pointing at you. You'll assist with the refreshments in the presence chamber after the initial reception. Don't speak, don't stare, just serve and withdraw. Understood? Yes, ma'am, you reply, heart racing at the prospect of witnessing the historic meeting firsthand. The next hour passes in a flurry of activity, polishing silver trays, arranging delicate porcelain cups, ensuring the special herbal tea the king prefers is properly brewed. Finally, a footman rushes into the servants' area. They're coming up the drive, he announces. Carriages and horses, quite a procession. Immediately, servants hurry to their positions. You follow a senior maid named Elizabeth carrying a tray of small cakes that the cook has prepared specially. Remember, Elizabeth whispers as you approach the presence chamber. Eyes down, move silently. If anyone speaks to you directly, which they shouldn't, answer only, "Yes, my lord," or "Yes, my lady," and nothing more. You enter the presence chamber through a side door, taking your place against the wall with the other servants. The room is already filled with courtiers in their finest clothes, murmuring excitedly among themselves. The king is not yet present, but his chair of state stands ready on a dais at the far end of the room. The atmosphere is charged with anticipation. You've heard so many stories about the savages from America that you're both nervous and curious to see these visitors for yourself. A hush falls over the assembly as the doors open and the master of ceremonies enters, striking his staff on the floor 3 times. His Majesty, King George II. Everyone bows or curtsies deeply as the king enters, resplendent in a coat of blue velvet embroidered with silver thread. He takes his seat, and only then do the courtiers straighten. Another announcement follows. Tomochichi, Miko of the Yamacraw Creek, and his delegation. The doors open again, and a group of men enter. At their head is a tall, dignified figure who must be Tomochichi himself. He's older than you expected, perhaps in his 70s, with a face lined by sun and experience. As the rumours suggested, his face is indeed painted. Not in garish war paint as the servants gossiped, but with subtle patterns in red and black ochre that highlight his strong features. He wears a mixture of native dress and European-style clothing, buckskin leggings and moccasins, but also a shirt of fine linen and a cloak trimmed with fur. Around his neck hang several necklaces of shells and beads that click softly as he walks. Behind him come several younger men similarly dressed and a boy of about 13 who stays close to the chief's side. The delegation approaches the king and stops at a respectful distance. There's a moment of silence as the two leaders regard each other, the German-born King of England and the Creek chief from lands across the ocean. Then, to the visible surprise of many courtiers, Tomochichi bows. Not in the European style, but with a dignified inclination of his head. He speaks in his own language, his voice deep and measured. A translator steps forward, a weathered Englishman in colonial dress who's clearly spent time among the Creek people. The great Miko Tomochichi greets the great chief of the English people. He brings gifts and friendship from across the great water. One of the younger men steps forward, carrying a bundle wrapped in soft hide. He unwraps it to reveal several eagle feathers mounted on decorated sticks. The translator explains, "These sacred eagle feathers have been carried to many Creek towns, signifying peace between our peoples." The Miko presents them to the English chief as a token of continued friendship. King George nods, and Mehmet, his Turkish valet, steps forward to accept the gifts with a bow. The ceremony continues with formal speeches from both sides, translated back and forth. You stand motionless against the wall, but you can't help stealing glances at this fascinating scene. Two vastly different worlds meeting in this ornate chamber. What strikes you most is the dignity of the Creek delegation. Despite the whispers and stares from the courtiers, they maintain a composed, almost regal bearing. Tomochichi speaks with the confidence of a leader, meeting the king's gaze directly, something even many English nobles hesitate to do. After the formal exchange of gifts and greetings, the king rises, signalling the end of the public audience. "We shall continue our discussions privately," he announces. "Refreshments will be served." This is your cue. Following Elizabeth's lead, you step forward with your tray of cakes, offering them first to the king, then to Tomochichi and his delegation. The chief studies the unfamiliar sweets for a moment before selecting one. He takes a bite, considers the taste, then nods appreciatively. As you serve the young Creek boy, he looks directly at you with curious eyes. For a brief moment, your gazes meet, and he gives you a small smile, a simple human connection across the vast gulf of language and culture that separates you. You quickly look down again, remembering your place, but the moment stays with you. The king and the Cherokee delegation withdraw to a smaller chamber for private talks, and the courtiers disperse, buzzing with excited conversation about the noble savages and their exotic appearance. As you return to the servants' area with your empty tray, Anne finds you. "Well, did you see them? What were they like?" "Not at all what I expected," you admit. The chief, he carried himself like a king himself, and they weren't wild or strange, just different. "Told you," Anne says with satisfaction. "Court gossip's usually wrong about everything. Now come on, they'll be dining in the king's private apartments tonight, and we need to help prepare." The rest of the day passes in a whirlwind of activity. The private dinner for the king and his guests requires just as much preparation as a full court banquet, even with fewer diners. Every detail must be perfect. The king is particularly concerned about impressing his visitors with English sophistication. In the kitchen, William Daniel is creating special dishes that showcase the best of English cuisine, while avoiding anything too strange or exotic that might confuse the Cherokee guests. Or roast beef, he declares, consulting his leather-bound notebook. The finest in Europe. They must try English roast beef and Yorkshire pudding, but not too much spice. Their palates won't be used to it. You help carry plates and linens to the king's private dining room, arranging everything according to the precise instructions of the butler. The table is smaller than the great banquet table, but no less magnificent, with gleaming silver, crystal, and the finest porcelain. The king will sit here, the butler instructs, indicating the head of the table. Chief Tomochichi to his right, that's the position of honour. The translator next to the chief, then the Cherokee boy. The other delegates and English officials alternate down the table. Perfect balance, perfect symmetry. As the dinner hour approaches, you're stationed in a small antechamber with two other servants, ready to fetch anything needed during the meal. Through the partially open door, you can hear the conversation as the king and his guests are seated. Ask the chief if he has tried wine before, the king says to the translator. There's a brief exchange in the Cherokee language. Then the translator replies, he says he has tasted the French wine, Your Majesty, but finds it too sour for his liking. The king laughs. Then he must try proper English port, much sweeter, much better. To your surprise, the dinner proceeds with remarkable ease. Despite the language barrier, the king and Tomochichi seem to develop a rapport, communicating through gestures and expressions when the translator struggles with certain concepts. The Cherokee delegates approach the unfamiliar foods with open curiosity, trying everything offered to them. They seem particularly impressed by the roast beef, though they politely decline a dish of potted eels. At one point, the young Creek boy asks a question that causes the translator to hesitate. What does he wish to know? The king asks. He asks why there are so many people in the walls, Your Majesty. There's a moment of confusion before the king realizes the boy is referring to the servants stationed around the room, standing motionless against the walls. Ah, the king says with a laugh. Tell him these are my people who help with the meal. They are part of the palace. When the translator relays this, the boy looks unconvinced, studying you and the other servants with curious eyes. He says something else to the translator. He says in their council houses, everyone who is present takes part in the meal and the talk. No one stands silent in the walls. For a moment, the king seems taken aback by this different perspective on what he takes for granted. Interesting, he says finally. Different customs, different ways. Tell him this is our English tradition. The meal continues, but you find yourself pondering the boy's observation. To him, the elaborate hierarchy of palace service, the system you're learning to navigate, appears strange and incomprehensible. For the first time, you see your role through outside eyes, and it gives you pause. After the dinner concludes, the real work begins for the servants, clearing the table, washing the precious dishes, polishing the silver, and preparing the rooms for the following day. It's well past midnight by the time you're finally released to go to bed. As you climb the narrow servant stairs, weary to your bones, you encounter a familiar face coming down. Mehmet, the king's Turkish valet, looking just as tired as you feel. He nods to you in acknowledgement, unusual for such a high-ranking servant to even notice a housemaid. Long day, he says in accented English. Yes, sir, you reply, surprised at being addressed. He pauses, studying you. You are new here? Yes, sir, started yesterday. He nods thoughtfully. The king was pleased with today's events. The Cherokee chief impressed him. A slight smile crosses his face. Not what the English courtiers expected from a savage, I think. You hesitate, uncertain if you should respond to this observation. Mehmet seems to read your caution. It is not so different, you know. I was brought here as a curiosity too once, a Turkish prisoner. Now I examine the king's piles and keep his private purse. He shrugs. Courts are the same everywhere. Always looking for the exotic to display. With that cryptic observation, he continues down the stairs, leaving you to ponder his words as you climb to your attic room. Anne is still awake when you arrive, sitting on her pallet mending a tear in her apron. "There you are," she says. "Thought you'd never make it up. How was it, serving the king's private dinner?" You sink onto your own hard mattress, too tired to even remove your shoes. Strange. Interesting. The Cherokee weren't anything like people said. "Never are," Anne replies with a yawn. "Half of what gets whispered around here is nonsense. Remember that." "I met Mehmet on the stairs just now," you tell her. "The king's Turkish valet. He actually spoke to me." Anne looks up sharply. "What did he say?" You relate the brief conversation, and Anne frowns. "Odd. He doesn't usually bother with new housemaids. Keep your distance there. He's got the king's ear, and that makes him dangerous." "He didn't seem dangerous," you protest. "Just thoughtful." "That's how the dangerous ones are," Anne says, returning to her mending. "The thoughtful ones, they notice things, remember things. In a place where most people look right through servants, the ones who actually see you are the ones to watch out for." You consider this as you finally remove your shoes and begin undressing for bed. In just 2 days, you've entered a world more complex than you ever imagined. A world of rigid hierarchy and unspoken rules, of politics and power, where even a conversation on a staircase might have hidden meanings. "Tomorrow's another big day," Anne says, blowing out the candle. "The king's taking the Cherokees hunting at Richmond. Half the household is going along, which means twice the work for those of us left behind. Better get some sleep." In the darkness, you stare up at the ceiling, mind still swirling with images from the day. Tomochichi's dignified bearing, the curious gaze of the Cherokee boy, Mehmet's knowing smile, worlds colliding in the ornate rooms of Kensington Palace, with you, a simple housemaid, witness to it all. Somewhere in the palace, a clock strikes 2. In just 3 hours, the bells will ring again, calling you to another day of service. But for now, you sink into exhausted sleep, dreaming of eagle feathers and painted faces. Turkish prisoners become royal favourites and silent servants standing in the walls. The days blend together in a haze of endless tasks, sore muscles and stolen moments of rest. A week has passed since the Cherokee delegation's arrival, and your body is finally adapting to the relentless pace of palace life. Your hands have hardened, your legs have strengthened, and you've learned to catch quick naps standing up against walls, a skill Anne assures you is essential to palace survival. "Morning," Anne mumbles as you both dress in the grey light before dawn. "King's got a drawing room tonight, gonna be a late one." You've learned that a drawing room is a formal evening reception where the king and royal family receive courtiers and distinguished visitors. For the family and guests, it's an evening of conversation, music, and political manoeuvring. For the servants, it's hours of extra work. "Will the Cherokees be there?" you ask, splashing cold water on your face from the basin you share with 4 other maids. "Nah, they left for Bristol yesterday. King's already moved on to the next thing." She yawns. "Now it's all about the Spanish ambassador's wife having a baby." Apparently, that's a matter of state importance. You've quickly discovered that palace life is a constant cycle of visitors, events, and ceremonies, each requiring perfect execution before being immediately forgotten in preparation for the next. Today's main task is preparing the Queen's drawing room for tonight's reception. As you and Anne head downstairs, the palace is already alive with activity despite the early hour. Fires are being lit, water is being hauled, and the first deliveries of the day, fresh bread, milk, flowers, are arriving at the service entrance. In the servants' hall, Mistress Keene is holding court, assigning duties with military precision. Anne, you and the new girl will assist Mrs. Thrale with the maids of honour. Their court dresses need preparation for tonight. Steam pressing, repairs, whatever's needed, report to the yeoman's wardrobe immediately after breakfast. Your heart sinks a little. The elaborate court mantuas worn by the maids of honour are notoriously difficult to prepare and maintain, but at least you'll be working with Mrs. Thrale, who's been kind to you so far. After a quick breakfast of porridge and ale, you and Anne make your way to the yeoman's wardrobe. This enormous room contains thousands of garments belonging to the royal family and court, everything from everyday clothes to the most elaborate ceremonial wear. Mrs. Thrale is already there, examining a magnificent mantua in pale blue silk, frowning at some invisible flaw in the fabric. "Ah, good, you're here," she says, without looking up. "We've got 6 court dresses to prepare by 4 o'clock. The maids of honour will need to begin dressing by then to be ready for the drawing room at 8. 4 hours to dress?" you ask in disbelief. Mrs. Thrale gives you a patient look. "Have you seen these gowns? The hoops alone take 20 minutes to position correctly. Then there's the stomacher, the petticoats, the overskirt, the train, not to mention the hair, which is an entire separate department." The mantuas are laid out across several tables, enormous confections of silk, brocade and lace, each at least 6 feet wide with elaborate trains. You've never seen such extravagant garments up close. The pale blue one Mrs. Thrale is examining has silver thread embroidery, depicting flowers and birds so detailed they almost seem alive. "This one belongs to Lady Howard," Mrs. Thrale explains. "Notice the seashell motif. That's her family crest. The embroidery is coming loose here." She points to a barely perceptible flaw in the silver stitching. "We need to repair it before tonight." For the next several hours you assist Mrs. Thrale and Anne in preparing the court dresses. Your task is relatively simple, carefully steaming the delicate fabrics to remove wrinkles while Anne handles basic repairs and Mrs. Thrale tackles the more complex embroidery issues. "These dresses cost more than a servant makes in 10 years, Mrs. Thrale tells you as you work. The silk alone is imported from China, the silver thread from Italy, the lace from Belgium, and they're worn maybe 4 or 5 times before the lady wants something new." "Seems wasteful," you venture cautiously. "Of course it is," Mrs. Thrale says with a shrug. "But waste is the point. Only the very wealthy can afford to be wasteful. That's how they show their status." As midday approaches, the door to the wardrobe opens and a young woman enters, perhaps 18, with fair hair and a haughty expression. She's wearing a simple day dress, but her bearing marks her as a member of the court rather than a servant. "Lady Howard," Mrs. Thrale says with a curtsy. "We weren't expecting you until this afternoon." Lady Howard waves a dismissive hand. "I wanted to check on my gown. The embroidery needed repair, yes?" "Just finishing it now, my lady." Mrs. Thrale gestures to the mantua. "Would you like to examine it?" Lady Howard approaches, studying the dress with a critical eye. "The shell pattern looks uneven here," she says, pointing to a section that looks perfectly fine to you. "I've reinforced the stitching, my lady, but I can add more detail if you wish." Lady Howard sighs dramatically. "I suppose it will have to do. I hear Lady Carlton has a new mantua from Paris with actual pearls sewn into the fabric. Pearls. How am I to compete with that?" "Your gown is the height of fashion, my lady," Mrs. Thrale says smoothly. "The seashell design is unique. Lady Carlton has nothing so distinctive." This seems to please Lady Howard, whose expression softens slightly. "Well, at least I won't look like every other lady at court." She glances at you and Anne, noticing you for the first time. "New maids?" "This one is," Mrs. Thrale says, nodding at you. "Just started last week." Lady Howard studies you briefly. She has good hands for fine work. See that she helps with my dresses in the future. With that pronouncement, she sweeps out of the room, leaving a faint trail of rose perfume behind her. That's a good sign, Mrs. Thrale tells you once Lady Howard is gone. She's demanding, but not cruel. Some of the ladies throw things at the servants when they're displeased. Throw things, you repeat, shocked. Oh yes, Lady Pembroke once hit a footman with a silver hairbrush because he brought her chocolate too cold. Split his forehead open. Nothing happened to her, of course, but the footman was dismissed for bleeding on the carpet. You're still processing this casual cruelty when the door opens again. This time, it's a different sort of visitor. The Turkish valet, Mehmet, whom you met briefly on the stairs after the Cherokee dinner. Mrs. Thrale, he says with a slight bow. The king requests the blue velvet coat with silver buttons for tonight's drawing room, the one from last summer. Of course, Mr. von Königstreu, Mrs. Thrale replies, using his formal German title. I'll have it pressed and sent up immediately. Mehmet's gaze falls on you, and a flicker of recognition crosses his face. The new housemaid. You're still here then. Many don't last the first week. Yes, sir, you reply, unsure how to respond to his direct address. Good. Perhaps you're stronger than you look. With that cryptic comment, he nods to Mrs. Thrale and leaves. That's twice he's noticed you, Anne whispers when he's gone. Very odd. Is that bad? You ask, remembering her warning about keeping your distance from the king's favourite. Not necessarily bad, just unusual. Mehmet doesn't typically concern himself with new housemaids. He moves in higher circles. She gives you a curious look. Maybe he sees something in you. Mrs. Thrale interrupts this speculation. Less gossip, more work. These gowns won't prepare themselves, and we still have the king's blue velvet to press now. By late afternoon, all 6 mantuas are ready, hanging like magnificent sculptures on special frames that maintain their elaborate shape. You're exhausted from the detailed work, your fingers sore from manipulating the delicate fabrics, but there's a satisfaction in seeing the gorgeous, finished products. Not bad, Mrs. Thrale says, which you've learned is high praise from her. Now we need to deliver them to the maids of honour's apartments. They'll be waiting to begin dressing. The maids of honour, young noblewomen who serve as companions to the royal women, have their own apartments in a separate wing of the palace. As you help carry the enormous dresses through the corridors, a challenging task given their size and weight, Anne explains more about their role. They're basically ornamental, she says. Pretty, well-born girls who bring music and laughter and light to the court. That's the official line anyway. Really, they're there to attract suitable husbands and keep the court lively. Dance, play music, gossip, flirt. That's their job. Sounds easier than carrying coal, you observe, struggling with the unwieldy blue mantua. Anne smirks. Different kind of hard. They're watched all the time. One wrong step, accepting the wrong man's attention, saying the wrong thing politically, and they're ruined. Beautiful cages, those mantuas. When you reach the maids of honour's apartments, you're greeted by a scene of controlled chaos. Young women in various stages of undress are being attended by their personal maids, with hairstylists, jewellery keepers and shoe fitters all competing for space. "Finally!" exclaims a striking brunette as you enter with Lady Howard's dress. "I was beginning to think I'd have to attend in my nightgown." "Apologies for the delay, Lady Howard," Mrs. Thrale says, directing you to place the mantua on a special stand. "The embroidery required extra attention." "Well, it's here now. Rebecca, help me with my stays." You watch in fascination as Lady Howard is transformed from a petulant young woman in a simple shift to a vision of 18th century court splendour. First come the stays, a rigid corset that cinches her waist to an impossibly small circumference. Then the enormous hooped petticoat that extends her skirts outward on both sides. Next, the elaborate underskirt, followed by the overskirt with its sweeping train. Finally, the stomacher, a stiff decorated panel, is pinned to the front of her bodice, completing the transformation. The process is indeed as time-consuming as Mrs. Thrale predicted. By the time Lady Howard is fully dressed, nearly 2 hours have passed, and that's before her hair is styled, a process that involves padding, pomade, powder, and seemingly endless pinning and arranging. How do they move in these things? You whisper to Anne as Lady Howard practices walking in small, careful steps. They don't much, Anne replies. Can't sit properly, can't walk normally, can barely breathe. That's the point. It shows they don't need to do anything useful. Once all the maids of honour are dressed, a rainbow of silk and jewels, Mrs. Thrale dismisses you and Anne. Your work is done here. Report to Mr. Hamilton in the Queen's drawing room. You'll be needed to help serve refreshments during the drawing room. You're surprised at this assignment. Serving at a formal royal event is usually reserved for more experienced staff, but as Anne explains on your way to find Mr. Hamilton, the drawing room requires all hands on deck. Every servant with a clean apron and steady hands gets pulled in on nights like this, she says. Just remember, eyes down, move silently, be invisible unless required. Mr. Hamilton is directing the final preparations in the Queen's drawing room, a magnificent space with silk-covered walls, crystal chandeliers and gilt furniture. Footmen in the royal livery are arranging chairs and tables, while others are laying out trays of delicate glasses for wine, punch and ratafia, a sweet liqueur popular with the ladies. "Ah, there you are," Mr. Hamilton says when he spots you. "You'll be stationed by the west wall with the small cakes and sweetmeats. Do not approach the guests. Wait for them to approach you. Offer the tray with your left hand. Keep your right behind your back. No speaking unless directly addressed, and then only 'Yes, my lord lady' or 'No, my lord lady.' Clear?" "Yes, Mr. Hamilton," you reply, intimidated by the responsibility. "Good. The King and Queen will arrive at 8 precisely. Courtiers are already gathering in the antechamber. Take your position now. You find your assigned spot along the west wall, where a small table holds a silver tray of exquisitely decorated little cakes, fruit tartlets, and candied fruits. Anne is stationed nearby with a tray of glasses. "Nervous?" she whispers as the first courtiers begin to enter the room. You nod, watching as the space fills with finely dressed nobles. The men are resplendent in brightly coloured silk coats with elaborate embroidery, their calves displayed in white silk stockings. The women move carefully in their enormous mantuas, their powdered hair towering above jewel-encrusted faces. "Don't be," Anne says. "They barely notice us, just part of the furniture." She's right. As the room fills, none of the courtiers so much as glance at the servants lining the walls. They're too busy greeting each other, jockeying for position, and trying to secure advantageous spots near where the King and Queen will sit. At precisely 8 o'clock, a hush falls over the room as the Master of Ceremonies announces Their Majesties King George and Queen Caroline. Everyone bows or curtsies deeply as the royal couple enters. The king is wearing the blue velvet coat you helped prepare earlier, while Queen Caroline is magnificent in a crimson mantua with gold embroidery. They move to their chairs at the head of the room, and only when they sit do the courtiers rise. The drawing room follows a precise protocol. First, selected courtiers are presented to the king and queen, approaching the royal chairs with deep bows or curtsies, exchanging a few words, then withdrawing. Next come the foreign ambassadors and their wives, each accorded time proportional to their country's importance to Britain. From your position against the wall, you observe the intricate dance of court politics playing out before you. Who speaks to whom, who is snubbed, who receives a smile from the Queen or a nod from the King, all are noted and analysed by the watchful courtiers. After the formal presentations, the atmosphere relaxes slightly. Musicians in a small gallery begin playing soft chamber music. Courtiers form conversational groups, though always with one eye on the royals. This is when servants like you are finally approached for refreshments. A gentleman in an elaborately embroidered green coat stops before your table, examining the cakes. He selects a tiny fruit tartlet with a casual gesture, as if you're merely an extension of the table rather than a person. As the evening progresses, you begin to recognise various court figures from gossip you've heard below stairs. There's the Duke of Newcastle, one of the King's chief ministers, deep in conversation with the Spanish ambassador. Lady Pembroke, she of the hairbrush throwing incident, is holding court among a circle of admirers. The maids of honour flit about like exotic birds, their enormous skirts requiring constant negotiation in the crowded space. Your feet are aching from standing still for so long, but you dare not shift position or lean against the wall. Any break in perfect posture could draw unwanted attention. So you stand, offering your tray when approached, observing the spectacle of Georgian court life from your unique vantage point. Around 10 o'clock, there's a subtle shift in the room's energy. Courtiers begin arranging themselves in a loose circle, and the musicians change to a livelier tune. Dancing, Anne whispers as she passes with a tray of empty glasses. The Queen loves court dances. Sure enough, Queen Caroline rises from her chair, followed by the King. Couples form for a formal minuet, the ladies' enormous skirts creating a particular challenge for the dance's precise movements. Yet they manage with practiced grace, having spent years learning these intricate steps. The maids of honour are in their element now, partnered with eligible gentlemen, their faces animated as they perform the formal patterns of Civil War soldiers were more likely to die from diarrhea than from bullets. No, really. The disease killed 44,000 Union soldiers. That's the equivalent of 10 entire Gettysburg battles, and that was just one of the many diseases they faced. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. Alright, tonight it's the American Civil War, but before we go anywhere, get comfortable. Like, actually comfortable. Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. Your eyes open to early morning light filtering through canvas. April 1863, Union Army, somewhere in Pennsylvania. First thing you notice is the straw poking through your thin blanket, jabbing into your back like tiny daggers. The wool blanket you're wrapped in scratches your skin and smells like wet dog mixed with sweat, not like your plush mattress at home. What pulls you fully awake is the sound, a bugle blaring reveille, hundreds of men coughing, someone nearby groaning with stomach cramps. That's becoming a familiar sound in camp, too familiar. Get up, Fletcher captain's coming through. You're Thomas Fletcher, 16 years old, though your enlistment papers say 18. You've been in the Union Army for exactly 3 weeks, and every morning you wake up wondering what the hell you were thinking. Back on your family's farm in western Pennsylvania, this time of morning meant feeding animals and helping Ma with breakfast. Now it means rushing to get dressed before the officers come through, trying to find clean water to wash your face, and praying your stomach doesn't betray you like it did yesterday. I swear to God, says your tent mate Wilkins, a factory worker from Philadelphia, if I have to dig another latrine today, I'm deserting. He doesn't mean it, not really, but the sentiment is there. The ground outside is mud. Not regular mud, this special kind of mud made by thousands of men living in close quarters with poor drainage. It's mixed with horse manure, human waste that didn't make it to the latrines, and whatever else has been discarded. And the smell? Jesus! I can't even describe it properly. It was bad. Like gag reflex bad. You'd probably need to breathe through your mouth. You know what's wild? 3 weeks ago, you were so excited to join. You'd heard Lincoln's call for volunteers, listened to the recruiter talk about glory and saving the Union, watched the town celebrate as you and 5 other boys signed up. Your ma cried, but your pa looked proud. Said you were doing what needed doing. Nobody told you about the mud, or the food, or the dysentery. Fletcher uniform inspection in 10 minutes. Get your ass moving. That's Sergeant Miller, former schoolteacher from Boston, seems to enjoy making your life miserable. You stumble out of your tent into the chaos of camp. 15,000 men all doing the same thing at once creates a special kind of madness. The camp stretches for miles, tents arranged in neat rows that somehow still look messy, campfires sending smoke into the morning air, men in various states of dress rushing about. Your stomach growls. Breakfast will be hardtack and salt pork, if you're lucky. Hardtack is basically a brick made of flour that could crack your teeth if you're not careful. Most guys soak it in coffee to soften it up. Problem is, sometimes that reveals the weevils living inside. Extra protein, the veterans joke. You're not laughing yet. Look alive, boys. It's Corporal Jenkins, looking way too chipper for this hour. Word is we're moving out tomorrow, heading south. The words send a jolt through you. South means closer to battle. You enlisted to fight, sure, but the reality of it is starting to sink in. They say Lee's army is on the move, Jenkins continues, lowering his voice like he's sharing state secrets. Could be the big one. William, the quiet farmer's son from Ohio who sleeps on your other side, looks up from lacing his boots. My pa says every battle is the big one until the next one comes along. Smart kid, William, barely older than you, but sometimes seems like he's carrying the wisdom of someone 3 times his age. His hands are permanently stained with dirt from the farm, much like yours. The morning routine is mind-numbing but necessary. Roll call, breakfast, drilling, more drilling, cleaning your rifle until you can see your reflection in the metal. You fired it exactly twice during training. Some of the boys had never held a gun before enlisting. "You seen Johnson this morning?" asks Wilkins, chewing on hardtack that makes an audible crunch with each bite. "Infirmary," says William quietly. "Fever got worse in the night." A moment of silence falls between you. 3 men from your company have already died of disease, and you haven't even seen battle yet. The infirmary tent is a place of nightmares, men moaning in pain, the smell of infected wounds and body odour, harried doctors moving from cot to cot with barely a glance at each patient. After breakfast, which is a generous way of describing what you just ate, it's drill time. 2 hours of marching back and forth across a muddy field, practicing formations that supposedly matter in battle. Forward march, right face, about face, load in 9 times, present arms. Your drill instructor is a weather-beaten man named Corporal Haynes who fought in the Mexican War. His voice carries across the field like thunder. You call that a formation. My dead grandmother could make a straighter line again. The rifle is heavy. That's the thing nobody tells you. The Springfield Model 1861 weighs about 10 pounds, which doesn't sound like much until you're holding it at shoulder arms for an hour. Your muscles burn. Sweat trickles down your back despite the cool spring air. But Haynes keeps pushing. When you meet Johnny Reb on the battlefield, you'll thank me. Loading your rifle needs to be instinct. You hesitate, you die. You try not to think about the dying part. Mid-morning brings a different kind of drill, bayonet practice, charging at straw dummies tied to posts, stabbing and slashing with a foot-long blade attached to your rifle. The thought of driving this into another human being makes your stomach turn, but you push the feeling down. This is what you signed up for. Put your weight into it, Fletcher, Haynes barks. They won't just stand there and let you poke 'em. By noon, your uniform is soaked through with sweat and your hands are blistered. There's a brief respite for a meal that's nearly identical to breakfast, and then it's equipment inspection. The sergeant walks down the line, examining each soldier's kit: rifle, bayonet, cartridge box, cat pouch, haversack, canteen, blanket, roll. Everything must be in place, clean as possible given the circumstances. Your rifle's filthy, Thompson, he says to the man next to you. Clean it again. When he reaches you, he pauses. Boots coming apart, Fletcher. See the quartermaster after this. You glance down. Sure enough, the sole of your right boot is separating from the upper. Great. The quartermaster is notoriously stingy with new equipment. Stitch it together, he'll probably say. We're not made of boots. After inspection comes fatigue duty, the Army's term for chores. Today, your squad is assigned to dig new latrines. The old ones are filling up fast and the smell is becoming unbearable even by camp standards. So you spend 2 hours digging trenches in the hard ground, taking turns with worn shovels. You know what my father told me before I left, says Wilkins, pausing to wipe sweat from his brow. He said, son, in the army you'll see the best and worst of men. He didn't mention I'd be smelling the worst too. That gets a laugh from the group. Humour, however crude, is your collective shield against the reality of your situation. By late afternoon, your hands are raw and your back aches, but the new latrines are dug. You head to the creek that runs along the edge of camp to wash up. The water is cold and not particularly clean, too many men using it upstream, but it's better than nothing. As you're scrubbing dirt from your hands, William appears beside you. Letter call came while we were digging, he says, holding out an envelope. This one's for you. Your heart leaps. Mail from home is the most precious thing in camp. You dry your hands on your trousers and take the letter carefully. Your mother's handwriting. You'll save it for tonight, something to look forward to. Any for you? You ask William. He shakes his head. Not today. Dinner is beans and salt pork, with coffee so weak it's practically brown water. But you eat every bite. One thing the army has taught you: never skip a meal. You never know when the next one is coming. As the sun begins to set, an unusual excitement runs through the camp. A travelling photographer has arrived and set up his equipment near the officers' tents. For 25 cents, soldiers can have their portrait taken to send home. Should we do it? Wilkins asks, genuinely excited for the first time in days. You check your meagre funds. 25 cents is a lot, nearly half of what you have left from your last pay. But the thought of sending your portrait home to your mother... Let's do it, you decide. The line is long, but you wait patiently. When your turn comes, the photographer, a thin, nervous man with ink-stained fingers, positions you in front of a plain backdrop. Chin up. Look brave, he instructs. You try your best to look like a soldier, not a frightened farm boy. The flash powder ignites with a bright burst and acrid smoke. That's it. In 2 weeks, if you're lucky, your mother will receive a tintype of her son in uniform. As darkness falls, campfires flicker to life across the vast encampment. Your company gathers around one, the familiar faces illuminated by the dancing flames. Someone has a harmonica and plays a mournful rendition of Home Sweet Home that makes your chest tight with longing. Now feels like the right time to read your letter. You carefully open the envelope, preserving it for a reply. Your mother's words leap off the page. News of home, how your father's managing the farm without you, your sister's new baby, you're an uncle now, questions about whether you're eating enough and staying warm. There's no mention of the war itself, as if by not acknowledging it she can keep you safe. The letter ends with a pressed wildflower from the meadow behind your house. The sight of it nearly undoes you. "Good news?" asks William, noticing your expression. "I'm an uncle," you manage, carefully tucking the flower back into the envelope. Around the fire, men share bits of news from their own letters, creating a patchwork map of home across the northern states. Stories of harvests and church socials and town gossips feel like dispatches from another world, but the conversation inevitably turns to tomorrow's march, and what might lie beyond it. "My cousin was at Bull Run," says Thompson, poking at the fire with a stick. "Said it was pure chaos. Men running in every direction, couldn't tell friend from foe through the smoke." "My brother fought at Shiloh," another soldier adds. "Said the dead were so thick on the ground you couldn't walk without stepping on somebody." You listen silently, fear coiling in your stomach. These are the stories they don't print in newspapers, that recruiters don't tell wide-eyed boys signing their names. "Enough of that talk," Jenkins interrupts. "We'll face what comes when it comes. No use borrowing trouble." Wise words, but cold comfort as you return to your tent for the night. The canvas structure seems flimsy protection against what awaits you in the days ahead. You settle onto your bedroll, the straw crackling beneath you. Outside, the sounds of camp gradually quiet, the occasional laugh, a bout of coughing, the distant neigh of horses. Above the tent, through a small gap in the canvas, you can see stars dotting the night sky. The same stars shine over your family's farm, over the Confederate camps somewhere to the south, over a country tearing itself apart. Sleep comes fitfully, as it always does in camp. Your dreams are a confusion of home and war, familiar faces and nameless fears. Tomorrow, you march toward whatever waits beyond the horizon. What you don't know yet is that this relatively comfortable camp life, despite its hardships, will soon seem like luxury. The mud, the poor food, the endless drilling, all of it preparing you for something much worse. But for now, you sleep, rifle within arm's reach, surrounded by men who were strangers 3 weeks ago and now know your snoring patterns. In the morning, the bugle will wake you again and the next chapter of your war will begin. The bugle sounds before dawn, jerking you from what little sleep you manage to get. Outside your tent, the camp is already stirring, an anthill of activity as 15,000 men prepare to march. "Rise and shine, princess," Wilkins says, already pulling on his boots. "Today's the day we earn our glory." "Or our coffins," William mutters, but only you hear him. Breakfast is hardtack and lukewarm coffee. You've learned to pound the hardtack into crumbs and mix it with coffee, creating a grey paste that's easier to swallow than trying to bite the rock-hard biscuit. Tastes like wet cardboard, but it fills the stomach. By first light, you're standing in formation with your company. The morning air is crisp, mist hanging low over the fields. Captain Hayes paces in front of the line, his boots polished despite the mud. He's young for a captain, maybe 25, with a neat moustache and eyes that have already seen too much. "Men," he says, voice carrying across the silent ranks. "We march south today to join the main army, 10 miles at least. Light packs, full canteens. Any man who falls out will answer to me personally. 10 miles doesn't sound too bad. Back home, you'd walk that far, just checking fences." But that was without a 10-pound rifle, 40 rounds of ammunition, a bayonet, canteen, haversack, and everything else the army deems necessary. The regiment moves out with surprising order, each company filing into place on the road. From your position you can see the column stretching ahead and behind, thousands of men in blue, a giant centipede winding through the countryside. The early sun glints off rifle barrels and brass buttons. Flags snap in the breeze. It would be beautiful if it wasn't terrifying. "You know what's crazy," Wilkins says, as you settle into the marching rhythm. "More people in this column than live in my entire hometown." He's right. It's hard to wrap your head around. All these men from farms and factories and shops across the Union, now moving as one massive organism toward whatever waits ahead. The first hour passes easily enough. The road is decent, spirits are high, and some men even sing as they march. John Brown's body echoes up and down the line. You join in at the chorus, feeling a part of something bigger than yourself. Then the road turns to mud. Recent rains have transformed the route into a brown soup that sucks at your boots with every step. What was a steady march becomes a slog. The singing dies away, replaced by curses and laboured breathing. Your pack straps dig into your shoulders. Each step requires extra effort to pull your foot from the mire. This, Wilkins pants beside you, is bullshit. 2 hours in, and the first men begin to fall out. Not many, mostly the obviously sick or elderly, but enough to notice the gaps forming in the column. An officer on horseback rides alongside, shouting encouragement that sounds more like threats. "Keep moving, any man stopping will face court-martial." By noon, your uniform is soaked with sweat despite the cool spring air. Your feet are screaming, blisters forming where your damp socks rub against poorly fitted boots. The column halts briefly beside a stream, officers allowing 15 minutes to refill canteens and relieve yourselves. You collapse on a patch of grass, legs trembling with fatigue. William sits beside you, face pale beneath a layer of road dust. Neither of you speaks, saving energy for what's ahead. Wilkins, somehow still energetic, drops down beside you and pulls off his boots. "First rule of marching," he says, inspecting his feet. "Take care of these, or you're finished." He produces a small tin of grease from his pocket and begins rubbing it on the raw spots. "Got this from an old Mex War veteran. Sheep fat mixed with beeswax. Stops the rubbing." He offers you the tin. The grease smells rancid, but you apply it gratefully to your own blistered heels. It's disgusting, but feels instantly better. "How far you reckon we've come?" William asks, accepting the tin next. Wilkins squints at the sun. 5-6 miles, maybe. Halfway there, if the captain was telling the truth. The thought isn't comforting. The 15-minute rest ends too quickly. Back on your feet, back in formation, back to putting one foot in front of the other. The road climbs now, winding up a gentle hill that feels like a mountain to your tired legs. As you crest the rise, something new appears ahead. Wagons, dozens of them coming toward the column. Ambulance wagons painted white with red crosses. The column parts to let them pass, and that's when you get your first real look at war. The wagons are packed with wounded men. Some sit upright, bandages around heads or arms, eyes vacant. Others lie flat, moaning with each bump in the road. The worst are ominously still, covered with blankets despite the warm afternoon. Jesus Christ, Wilkins whispers, his usual humour gone. A soldier in a blood-stained uniform sits at the edge of one wagon, missing an arm below the elbow. His remaining hand clutches a Bible. He makes eye contact with you as the wagon passes, and you see something in his expression that chills you. Not pain, but a strange distance, as if he's looking at you from across an unbridgeable chasm. The wagons keep coming. 10, 20, 30. How many men? Hundreds, at least, all headed north, away from wherever you're marching toward. That's the 12th Massachusetts, someone in the ranks says. They got hit bad at Chancellorsville. The name means nothing to you now, but soon it will join the growing lexicon of battle names that every soldier knows, places where men died in droves. The column marches on, but the mood has changed. The reality of what awaits has been made flesh in those broken bodies. Conversation dies away. Even the officers ride more quietly. By late afternoon, your world has narrowed to the few feet of road ahead and the endless cycle of placing one foot before the other. Your shoulders burn from the weight of your gear. Your throat is parched despite careful sips from your canteen. Hunger gnaws at your belly. When the order finally comes to make camp, it's like a reprieve from execution. The regiment files off the road into a large meadow, already filling with other units. Tents go up with practiced efficiency, despite exhausted hands. Fires flicker to life as darkness falls. You sit with your company, too tired to even complain, watching the coffee boil in the shared pot. Your feet throb inside your boots, but you're afraid to remove them, not sure you can get them back on over your swollen feet. 10 miles, the captain said. Wilkins groans, lying flat on his back. That was 15 if it was a step. 16, corrects a new voice. You look up to see a lean, weathered soldier standing at the edge of your firelight. He's older, 30 at least, with a sergeant's stripes and a cavalry trooper's unmistakable bow-legged stance. "Saw you boys coming in," he says, squatting down beside your fire. "First big march?" You nod, too tired for words. He chuckles. Gets easier. Sort of. He extends a hand. "Sergeant Michael Reeves, 8th Pennsylvania Cavalry." "You been fighting long?" William asks after introductions. Reeves nods, accepting a cup of coffee from Wilkins. "Since 61. Bull Run, Peninsula Campaign, Antietam, Fredericksburg." He lists the battles like stops on a familiar road. "What's it like?" you hear yourself ask. "The fighting, I mean." Reeves studies you over the rim of his cup. His eyes are green, you notice, but somehow darker than any eyes you've seen. "Ain't like anything they tell you," he says finally. "Ain't glorious, ain't noble. It's loud and it's confusing and it's..." He pauses. "It's men trying to kill each other is what it is." He must see the fear in your faces because his expression softens slightly. "Look, you're in a good outfit. 6th Corps has solid leadership. Stay together, do what your officers tell you, and most of you will make it through. Most, not all." The word hangs in the air. "Any of you boys know how to play poker?" Reeves asks, changing the subject. None of you do, but he teaches you the basics, using pebbles for chips. For an hour, you forget your aching feet and the long march ahead as you learn flushes and straights and full houses. Reeves wins most hands, but lets each of you take a victory too. As the game winds down, he becomes reflective. "Been at this 2 years now," he says, shuffling the worn cards with practiced ease. "Seen things I hope you boys never do. But I'll tell you this, it ain't the Rebs you need to fear most out here." "What then?" asks William. "Yourself," Reeves says simply. "Fear will kill you faster than any bullet. Man gets scared enough, he freezes up, or he runs. Either way, he's done for. He deals another hand, then continues. But there's something worse than fear out here. You wait for him to continue, not sure you want to hear it. Indifference, he says. Seen it happen to good men. They stop caring, stop seeing the dead as people, start thinking of everything as just something to get through. He taps the deck. That's when you lose something you don't get back. The conversation turns sombre after that. Reeves bids you good night, promising to look for you when the dance starts, as he puts it. Sleep comes quickly, despite the hard ground. Your body is too exhausted to care about comfort, but sometime in the dead of night you wake suddenly, unsure why. Then you hear it, screaming. Not battle cries or calls for help, but the terrible sound of a man trapped in his own mind. Night terrors, William whispers beside you. My uncle got 'em after the Mex War. Somewhere in the vast encampment, a soldier is reliving horrors in his sleep. The screams eventually stop, but sleep is harder to find afterward. Dawn arrives with the inevitable bugle. Your body protests every movement, muscles stiff from yesterday's march, but there's no choice. The army moves on with or without you. Breakfast is meagre. The supply wagons are running behind, the quartermaster explains. You divide hardtack and share coffee, everyone getting less than they need. As your company forms up, you notice gaps in the ranks. Some men who started yesterday aren't here today, fallen out, sent to the ambulance wagons, or simply disappeared in the night. Desertion is rarely mentioned, but everyone knows it happens. The second day's march begins like the first, but the pace seems slower. Men are already tired, feet already blistered. The road is crowded now with artillery batteries, supply wagons and cavalry scouts moving back and forth along the column. Around mid-morning, a new sound reaches your ears, a distant rumble like summer thunder, but in a cloudless sky. Artillery, says an older private named Davis. Big guns, 15-20 miles south. A murmur passes through the ranks. Battle, somewhere ahead. The abstract suddenly becomes concrete. Your mouth goes dry despite the water in your canteen. The column presses on, the distant bombardment a constant reminder of your destination. The officers look more serious now, conferring in hushed voices as they ride alongside. By noon, new sights appear along the roadside, evidence that the war has passed this way before. A chimney standing alone, the house it belonged to now ashes and blackened timbers, fields trampled by thousands of boots and hooves, an abandoned cannon, its barrel burst from overuse. "Welcome to Virginia, boys," Wilkins says grimly. You're in the south now, enemy territory, though this part has changed hands so many times it's hard to say who it belongs to anymore. The few civilians you see watch from doorways with expressionless faces, neither welcoming nor hostile, just tired. A mile further, you pass something that stops conversations mid-sentence. A tree beside the road, and from one sturdy branch, a noose. It swings empty in the breeze, but the message is clear. Someone died here, whether deserter, spy, or civilian, impossible to say. The march continues through the afternoon, your feet moving automatically now, mind somewhere far away. You think of home, of your mother's cooking, of the soft bed waiting in a farmhouse hundreds of miles north. The distance feels insurmountable. Late in the day, rain begins to fall, a gentle shower at first, then a steady downpour that soaks through your uniform in minutes. Water drips from your cap into your eyes. Your already blistered feet now squish with each step, the wet leather of your boots rubbing raw skin. When camp is finally made, it's in a muddy field already churned by previous regiments. No fires tonight, the wood is too wet, and smoke might give away positions to enemy scouts. Cold rations, eaten in the rain, huddled under whatever shelter you can find. Your tent, pitched hastily in the downpour, leaks from a dozen places. You, Wilkins, and William sit in miserable silence, water pooling around your legs, too wet and tired to even complain. "My sister got married last Sunday," William says suddenly, staring at nothing. "Wrote me about it last month, said she wished I could be there to see it." The random statement hangs in the damp air, a reminder of the normal lives continuing elsewhere, oblivious to your current misery. "My girl's probably walking out with Jimmy Porter by now," Wilkins adds. "Told her not to wait, but she promised she would." You think of your own family, wondering what they're doing at this moment. Sitting down to dinner, perhaps. Your empty chair at the table. Your father saying grace, maybe asking God to watch over his son. "Why'd you join up?" you ask Wilkins, realising you've never discussed it. He's quite so long, you think he hasn't heard. Finally, "Factory where I worked shut down. Army pays regular, at least." A pause. "You?" The truth is complicated. Patriotism, yes. Adventure, certainly. But mostly because everyone expected it, because saying no seemed harder than saying yes. "Seemed like the right thing," is all you say. William nods, as if this makes perfect sense. "My older brother died at Antietam," he says softly. "Felt like I owed it to him." The rain drums on the canvas above. Somewhere in the vast camp, a harmonica plays a melancholy tune that seems to capture everything you're feeling. Sleep comes in fits and starts, your body too uncomfortable for true rest. Twice you wake to roll away from water dripping directly on your face. Morning arrives grey and drizzly. The march resumes, somehow even more miserable than before. The mud is deeper, the fatigue more profound, the muscles more sore. But something new enters the equation today. Anticipation. The artillery sounds are closer now, no longer distant rumbles but distinct booms that occasionally shake the ground. Cavalry couriers gallop past the column with increasing frequency, carrying dispatches to and from the front. You're close now, close to whatever awaits. Around midday, the column halts more permanently than the usual short breaks. Officers ride back and forth, conferring and pointing. The men use the opportunity to rest, though the air of tension prevents true relaxation. "What's happening?" William asks, though none of you have answers. An hour passes before Captain Hayes approaches your company. His uniform is mud-splattered, but his voice is steady. "We'll be making camp here," he announces. "The main Union army is deployed 3 miles ahead. We join them tomorrow morning." The news sweeps through the ranks like wildfire. Tomorrow you might see battle. As tents are raised and fires lit, rumours fly faster than cavalry scouts. The Confederate army is just beyond that ridge. No, they're retreating toward Richmond. Lee himself is commanding the Southern forces. No, he's miles away. The fighting will be minimal. No, it will be the biggest battle of the war. In this storm of speculation, Sergeant Reeves appears at your campfire again. He looks different today. Alert, focused, his cavalry uniform crisp despite the conditions. "Thought I'd find you boys here," he says, declining coffee this time. "Wanted to check in before tomorrow." "What's really happening?" Wilkins asks directly. Reeves glances around, then lowers his voice. "Confederate forces are dug in along a creek about 4 miles south. Good defensive position. Our boys have been probing their lines since yesterday, looking for weakness." "Will we attack?" you ask, your mouth suddenly dry. "Or be attacked," Reeves says with a shrug. "That's for the generals to decide. Either way, your regiment will likely see action." He stands to leave, then hesitates. "Listen," he says, looking at each of you in turn. "First time under fire there's no preparing for it. Just remember your training. Load, aim, fire, load, aim, fire. Don't think beyond that. As darkness falls, an unusual quiet settles over the camp. Men write letters home by firelight, clean their weapons for the dozenth time, or simply sit in contemplation. A chaplain moves among the companies, offering prayers and communion to those who want it. You find yourself unable to write the letter you've been composing in your head all day. What do you say when tomorrow might be your last day on Earth? What words can possibly bridge that gap? In the end, you write simply, "Dear Ma and Pa, we've marched to Virginia. I'm well. Don't worry. I'll write again when I can. Your loving son, Thomas." It feels inadequate, but it will have to do. You seal the envelope and give it to the company mail orderly, who promises to send it north with the next courier. The night deepens. Fires burn low. Around one nearby, a group of veterans from another regiment are sharing stories, not of battles, as you might expect, but of strange occurrences and superstitions. "Swear on my mother's Bible," one bearded soldier is saying as you approach their circle. "Saw a man at Fredericksburg take 7 bullets, center mass, and walk away without a scratch. Had a Bible in his breast pocket, stopped the first one, and the rest just went around him somehow." Another veteran snorts. "That's nothing. We had a fella in our company, night before Antietam, dreamed he saw his own grave with his name on it. Next day, first volley, bullet right through the heart." You listen, both fascinated and disturbed. These are the tales of the war that don't make it into newspapers or official reports. "You know what keeps you alive out there?" asks a third soldier, a sergeant with an empty sleeve pinned up. "Not luck, not skill. It's having something to live for. Man wants to see home again bad enough. Somehow the bullets miss him. Or having something worth dying for," adds another quietly. You return to your own fire, thoughtful. Wilkins is cleaning his rifle again, though it's already immaculate. Williams stares into the flames, saying nothing. None of you mentions tomorrow. As you settle onto your bedroll for what might be your last peaceful night, you find yourself hyper-aware of everything. The scratch of wool blankets, distant laughter from another campfire, the occasional whinny of horses. Life, in all its messy detail, suddenly precious. Sleep, when it finally comes, is surprisingly deep. Your exhausted body overrides your anxious mind, and in the black hours before dawn, the bugle calls you to what waits ahead. The bugle tears through darkness, jerking you from sleep. For a moment, disorientation grips you. Where are you? Then reality crashes back. Virginia, the army. Today, around you, the camp erupts into activity. Men stumbling from tents, officers shouting orders, the clatter of equipment being gathered in the pre-dawn gloom. No time for proper breakfast, just hardtack stuffed into pockets and cold coffee gulped down between preparations. Captain Hayes moves through the company, his face grim. Full battle gear, 60 rounds of ammunition per man. Fill your canteens completely. Your hands shake slightly as you prepare. Loading your cartridge box feels different today. Each paper-wrapped bullet might soon be fired at another human being, or might save your life. The weight of your equipment, normally annoying, now feels reassuring, especially the bayonet. As the eastern sky lightens to grey, your regiment forms up with the others of your brigade. No drums this morning, no bands playing, just thousands of men standing silently in formation, breath fogging in the cool air. Colonel Montgomery, your regimental commander, rides to the front. Even from your position in the ranks, you can see his face is deadly serious. "All men of the 140th Pennsylvania," his voice carries over the quiet ranks. "Today we join the Army of the Potomac in battle against Confederate forces. You will conduct yourselves with courage and discipline. Remember your training. Remember why we fight. For the Union. For freedom." The speech is brief, lacking the fiery patriotism of recruitment rallies. This is different. This is real. The regiment moves out as dawn breaks, marching in column along a narrow country road. After about an hour, you notice a change in the surroundings. Fence rails torn down for firewood, trees splintered by artillery, deep ruts in the road from gun carriages, the signs of armies. Then you hear it. Not the distant rumble of yesterday, but actual gunfire. Sharp cracks of rifles, the heavier boom of artillery. It's still some distance away, but unmistakable now. Wilkins glances at you, sweat already beading on his forehead despite the cool morning. Guess they started without us. No one laughs. Humour feels strange now, out of place. The column quickens its pace. Messages pass up and down the line of officers. Ahead, you can see a ridge where other Union regiments are already deployed. Blue lines against the green hillside. "That's our position," Captain Hayes announces, pointing to an open field near the centre of the ridge. "We're reinforcing the line. As your regiment approaches, the sounds of battle grow louder. You can now distinguish individual volleys, the synchronised crash of hundreds of rifles firing at once. The ground occasionally trembles from artillery. Your mouth is desert dry despite water from your canteen. Your bowels feel loose. Veterans say it happens to everyone before battle, the body preparing to shed weight for flight or fight. Some men stop to relieve themselves at the roadside, ignoring the usual camp modesty. "Jesus," William whispers beside you. "Look at that." Beyond the ridge, smoke hangs over the distant tree line, white puffs from artillery mixed with the darker smoke of rifle fire. Through gaps in the smoke you can see flashes of movement, men advancing, retreating or falling. Colonel Montgomery halts the regiment at the base of the ridge. "Fix bayonets." The sound of steel blades clicking onto 1,500 rifle barrels sends a chill through you. This isn't drill anymore. You climb the ridge in line of battle, shoulder to shoulder with the men of your company, other companies ahead and behind. Every step brings the sounds of conflict closer, louder. At the crest, you get your first clear view of the battlefield below. It's nothing like you imagined. A creek runs through a shallow valley bordered by woods on the far side. Between the ridge where you stand and that creek is open farmland, now torn by shell holes and scattered with dark shapes you realise with horror are bodies. The far woods are shrouded in gun smoke, but you can see flashes of fire within, Confederate positions. Union batteries are positioned along your ridge, the artillerymen working their guns with mechanical precision. Every few seconds, a cannon fires with a deafening boom, adding to the constant crash of sound. Captain Hayes positions your company in a gap between two batteries. "We hold this line," he shouts over the noise. "Fire on command only." You stand in the front rank, rifle gripped so tightly your knuckles are white. Beside you, William's face is pale, his lips moving in what might be prayer. On your other side, Wilkins stares ahead with strange intensity. Minutes pass like hours. The Confederate artillery has the range of your position now. Shells explode on the ridge, showering dirt and deadly fragments. You flinch at each explosion, fighting the urge to duck or run. 100 yards to your right, a shell lands directly on a gun crew. The explosion lifts one man completely off his feet, throwing him yards away. Another crumples instantly. The survivors continue loading their cannon as if nothing happened. "Get ready," Captain Hayes shouts. Through the smoke in the valley, you see movement. A line of grey, Confederate infantry advancing across the open ground toward your position. Their battle flags flutter above them. Even at this distance, you can see bayonets gleaming. Colonel Montgomery rides behind your line. "Steady, boys."